Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of What's Going On in Japan Tech Market Podcast. Today's podcast is very special because it's the second episode of how to build a successful career in UI UX. And I have, again, two very special guests, Lorraine from Toronto and Nondo from Tokyo this time. We're going to learn a lot more from you guys, like, maybe a bit deeper questions this time, the bit higher levels. So yeah, Nondo and Lorraine, welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me today, AB. I'm super stoked. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome.
Same here.
Nondo, do you like to, briefly tell us about yourself, what you do, and how you ended up in Japan?
Sure. So I work in Tokyo at agency design consultancy agency, which is called ACO. It's part of the Monster Lab group of companies. And I am originally from sunny Zambia in southern Africa. Well, all the people who don't know where that is, it's just above Botswana and South Africa. And I've been in Japan for about maybe now 4 years. So I did my master's in engineering here and then kind of transitioned into like the workplace after that.
Great. And I think you guys all know Lorraine. She's a designer with Avanade in Toronto. Lorraine, anything new, anything exciting going on?
Nothing really. But I'm also the same space as Nondo. I also work in consultancy as well. So yeah, you can get both of a consultant point of view this time because it's so different than like working in-house or an agency. And Nondo, I also know where Zambia is, so you didn't have to explain that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You'd be so surprised. Like people be like, is that like where the elephants? I'm like, no, dude, like that's like the whole entire continent, at least Southern Africa has elephants, so it's, yeah, no, I do get that. So I always need to just kind of like shout out and be like, hey, take a look
trendsetter.
Yes.
Trendsetter there.
Nice. I have a question. So I'm not from design or even consulting. So I'd like to know from you guys, like, what is the difference between the agency and the consulting background you guys are doing?
Okay, I'll go that first because also I am I'll say I'm more of a hybrid. What that means is that I have a background in designing cities. Like what I mean by that is in architecture and urban design. That was my job before I got into UX design, and I actually do both of those. So and what that means is that for agency work, which is what I've always been in, is that I have clients. That's and each client has like a different objective, but yeah, and in-house is obviously doing it in-house. For consultancy, as I don't do that as much, or probably more so for smart cities, I'm probably going to hand that over to Lorraine because I don't really do that as much right now.
Mm-hmm. So actually, for in consulting, it's a bit different than like in recruitment consulting, AB, but it's like the same general line where you still have clients to deal with, but then you only work with one client and you are put into their office. So it's kind of very similar to what do they call it? Like those like dispatch companies in Japan.
Okay. Yeah.
Where you get put into there, but it's not like a contract. It's more like we're considered like professionals, and we're just there to solve problems and give advice. And then sometimes we are there to fill in a extra like headcount if their team doesn't have as many employees. But it's usually like, instead, like we are actually put into that company's like process, and then their actual like office compared to like agency you're working in your office, the company's office, and then you're doing like many projects, whereas consulting you're just doing one, you only have one client, and then you're
totally clear. So do you like sit in a client's office for more than a month, 2 months, 3 months? Is there any fixed duration, or it depends?
It depends. It depends on like how long the project is. Sometimes it can extend you for up to like a year, maybe. But usually, I think on average, they're about 3 to 6 months. They don't go that long.
Understood.
Yeah.
All right. So would you kindly like walk me through your like workflow? Like how does your, day-to-day starts, or, how's your workflow in general?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna pick up on what Lorraine said because I sit in the office, so I kind of see all my team members in the same agency. So we have a culture towards that. And what that means is also the management, the HR is kind of consistent for me. So my right now I'm remote working. So it's not, I wouldn't say this is my standard workflow, but usually what would happen for me is that I usually start my day sorting out my admin, kind of like everyone else, my personal admin, sorry, by the way, I should clarify that. Then after that, if I can, hit the gym, do a bit of exercise. Again, that's actually the reason why this guy.
Okay, no ninjas.
Yeah. But then after that, once I get to the normal day of work, it's usually what we do is that because we're really tied to a team, is that either it's a general meeting where everyone in the office like comes together and kind of like gets updated on what's happening in the office. And then after that, my tasks usually start a bit later in the day because uh, most of the projects, the project I'm kind of working on is not based in Japan. So time zone difference. I usually start my day effectively at 11, like my first meeting, which is like what we'd call like a stand up. And a stand up is just kind of like a progress meeting into the tasks and stuff that need to be done by the design team. And I think that's another interjection that comes in with the difference between my side, where in an agency, is that at that stand up, that's where you'd have like your UI designers, your engineers, and the client is not part of that most of the time. And so it's pretty much sorting out everything and then getting that done for the rest of the day, and then having a separate meeting with the client to see if that meets their requirements or if it needs to be further revised. And then, yeah, after that, I suppose it goes back to just wrapping up the day. I know it doesn't sound exciting, but I think, yeah, it's not really that exciting. It's not bad work, we do it
Yeah.
because we love it. But I would also say, maybe in short, is that what you see on YouTube, um, all that like interesting, like, hey, this is my day in the life of a designer or a day in the life of a musician. I think a lot of that is what's happened in a week compressed into one day, because unfortunately with remote working especially, it's really condensed. Like you jump through meetings so many times, or
Yeah.
you don't have time to actually get out. Although one thing I will say, and I'm going to shut up now, is that I do also try and change places. So I'll go to the local library, go to office in the morning. If I'm there, then afterwards I'll switch to local library or another place in Shibuya called Safecast, which is another organization I work at. So yeah.
Awesome. So I think you talk a lot about the meetings and like, a lot of things. So how do you like, what kind of research methods do you use to make all those tasks done?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I maybe I can add for the methods. I would say I don't have a specific method because it's case by case. I do follow though specific principles that I've just built out through experience. The best ways I always start to approach a problem is to find out what existing information is there or there isn't. Thereafter, it's kind of then breaking that down into smaller bits, compartmentalizing it, and then slotting them into, I use kind of like tasks like Kanban and stuff like that,
Mhm.
to kind of follow my day. So that's how I would generally do it for bigger tasks. If it's related to actually something related to design, in UX design, I'm a very much a student of the design thinking principles. That's kind of how I've been educated And that's kind of like, and design thinking, basically, it's kind of a popular word right now, but it breaks down the bigger components of a project into 5 specific categories. There are other ways of doing it. Other ones are like, what I mean is like the double diamond. You have other stuff which is related to men. It's just a process of saying, we have these big 5 stages. We then take those big 5 stages and kind of break them down how we operate in a day. The first one, very simply, just to give you an example, would be, for example, research. With that research are you going to do interviews? How do you find out about your user? How do you help your client to define the problem? Because, sometimes clients, especially with UX, they don't know that they need a UX designer. First of the time they'll walk into a place and they'll say, oh, can you do some UI, user interface for me? And right now, one of the biggest challenges in the industry is that as UX designers, we have to do a lot of educating in this, because there's still a gap in understanding the value that user experience brings to a specific market and a specific use case, and also what that means as it's surfaced. What I mean by surfaced, is it going to be some sort of data point, some physical point, or is it something more culturally inclined where we're trying to understand the context so we can be more socially sensitive, or at least bring forth ideas of accessibilities in what we do? So yes, so I would say follow principles, and then after that, break down to tasks. And then the last thing, then try and understand, go back to what the client wants and what type of people they're trying to create a service for.
Awesome. So how do you practice? Maybe Lorraine can answer, like, how do you practice universal designing, Lorraine?
I think for me, I approach it in a different way, because I know universal design, they think of like accessibility, but there's another component to it, which is like the cultural side. So I try to understand like where the users come from. So like if I was like, for example, if I was designing for Japan, Japanese market, I have to understand that, for example, in general, Japanese users, they tend to like more information, more content to help them with their decision process. And some of their like buttons, I know, is like they're very specific on the action, compared to like in English, where it's like search and like go here, learn more, just due to the nature of the language. So in terms of that, I kind of have to understand like where is this coming culturally from like the user's perspective. So usually if I had to design for something that was of a user that was a different culture of mine, I try to understand like what their background is, so I can get more in context of what they need from a design perspective.
Great. So what do you think, like, now recently, like will be the next big thing in UX design? Like we talk about design thinking, we talk about universal design, but what is kind of trending?
I think for me, and actually I'm going to add something to universal design, what Lorraine said. For me, I've been practicing accessibility in architecture ever since I started. Back in the 1950s, we had this discourse in architecture on the curb effect. I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you've seen, like, the side of the road, you have that little curb that helps you to get up on the street if you're in a wheelchair. Yeah. So there's going to be a step, right? Mm-hmm. So if you want to get up the curb, they've actually like leveled that at a 30-degree angle. And that idea of accessibility has always been in the discourse of physical design, but coming to digital space, it's always had a gap. And the exciting thing I really look at now is that the story of that accessibility is now also seeing itself in new dimensions for UX. Specifically, I really love that AR, augmented reality, is something that's trending, but we haven't started having that big conversation about accessibility, right? One thing you can look at is like, yes, we can create this great augmented reality, I don't know, scene or interface, but are the icons the right size? We haven't even had the discussion about that yet. Or what happens when someone's not able to use their hands? Are they going to use a controller? So AR is really exciting because it's known, but we don't know what it's going to be like in terms of one, accessibility. That's why it's exciting. Two, healthcare is going to be really big with AR. And I'll probably leave the last one also related to AR, which is vehicles. Of course, last week, Apple produced like some great stuff of like CarPlay. Sorry if I get the name wrong. And Spotify has been doing some cool stuff. Of course, in Japan, we've got the big guys like Honda and Nissan who also like doing some really interesting stuff. So for me, AR and UX is really interesting because there's so many questions, and a lot of companies, stats has shown a lot of companies are like, we need UX designers in augmented reality. Like,
wow.
So
I think this could be a very interesting takeaway for our listeners that, AR and combining AR with UX for the future.
Yes.
Could be very exciting and interesting. So Nondo, you mentioned a lot of companies' names like Honda, Nissan, Mitsubishi, or like Spotify, Apple. So I want to know, like, where do you go for your inspiration, like when it comes to UX?
So again, to everyone, okay, again, I come from a architecture background. My inspiration comes from observation. A lot of people who know me will know that I draw a lot of sketches. And the reason I draw a lot of sketches is that is the language I use to visually connect with people and also to learn about them. So basically, I use, if anyone's ever studied human resource management, I use the methodology of observe first, then interact with that like question mark. Question mark might be, why are these people talking to each other? And once you have that, your own understanding and their understanding, that kind of filters its way into, I suppose, into the digital stuff. So my inspiration just comes from my environment. So I've got like 1,000 of like pictures and stuff like that, kind of trying to understand the world. Another place, of course, is just like through like Pinterest and things like that. But that actually comes really late in the process, to be honest. I would have tried to connect the human understanding first, because digital services, technology should always be the last solution in your process. Because unless a client specifically asks for some sort of technology in their process, again, technology could be AR, it could be virtual reality, it could be some sort of desktop dashboard. But until we actually have a clear understanding on what the human relationship is in that, it's a very difficult thing to tie back into how that's going to validate itself as an experience that someone wants to come back and use again. So I get it from life and people.
Okay.
Through drawing.
Through drawing. Awesome. Yeah. You touched a little bit about VR as well. So, I mean, coming from a non-technical background, it's not very clear for me actually, like the difference, between AR, VR, and how UX people will be collaborating here.
Yeah. So for virtual reality, great example right now is the Metaverse that is coming from Facebook/Meta. And the best way I can explain that is that you put on your goggles, right?
Yeah.
And you go into a 3-dimensional world. And you experience that 3-dimensional world, either visiting Tokyo, visiting Canada, or some other place, right? It takes you to that place. Augmented reality uses your existing context to kind of, so I'm not going to, right now, if I start using augmented glasses, Spotify release some glasses, big players there are, again, Facebook, and you've got Natica, I'm pronouncing the name wrong, but the Pokemon guys, really big.
Oh, Niantic?
Well. Niantic, yes.
Niantic.
As well with Ep4. Those are really big players in that game. Google as well, but Google is not as powerful. And I'll say Apple in the AR space, And what they all do is that they bring your context into it, right? So if I'm playing an AR game, I'm going to be in the park. it's going to affect that. It's going to augment it, right? It's going to change that environment, where VR is going to be like, well, you can be in your bedroom. I'll bring the park to you. So
I see.
it's for UX. What that means is it's a very different ball game. I think AR is definitely much more mature in that space. And that's just because the cost of getting into AR is much cheaper. However, things such as usability testing is very new to UX designers, and because there's a lot of skill sets that go beyond your expected skills you're taught as a 2D UX designer. Very simple one. UX design, when you're doing testing, you're going to do it in an enclosed space, right? In the office room. And it's almost like when you do lab experiments, you do it in a control room. You have lots of control settings. AR, as I said, is using your context, right? So if you set up an AR program or app in a park or in a reserve or something, that you're going to have to take the person who's testing your app to that park. And that's when, I don't know if, I'm not going to say the bad word, but that's when the crap hits the fan, basically. Because then UX designers are not like trained, like, oh, okay, how do you position yourself in the park? Like, how are we going to look at the sun? How are we going to look at the weather? All of these things, the industry, it's still new to a lot of people in the industry. And I think it'll take some time to mature. Where VR right now, VR is running through, or virtual reality, is running through a hype cycle. Great thing about a hype cycle is we're reaching the peak. And what I mean by hype cycle is what we use using tech to actually try and define where technology is in relation to the news that's coming out. So VR is right now, especially in the metaverse, you can be everything, anything.
Okay. And is it related to Web3? So Web3 is also called Metaverse, or virtual reality is the same thing, or?
Yes. Web 3.0 is actually what's pushing some of the validation in terms of virtual reality right now. And also another component of that will also be like 5G. There are a couple of other technologies that are coming out, cloud-based software as well. But yes, it's kind of like exciting right now. I think we're with virtual reality and specifically Metaverse, because VR has been out for quite a while. Metaverse right now feels like the way drones were in, messing up my dates here now, but maybe like 2010, somewhere there. Remember Amazon said they're going to be delivering all these parcels with these drones, and like everyone got excited, and then it just never happened. Because everyone realized that there are laws and regulations that actually govern you flying drones like near airports and all. Yeah, so with virtual reality right now for UX designers, it's great for us, but we don't have a very deep know-how into how it will affect the user, for example. So healthcare, there are regulations that you have to be above the age of 12 to 14. But then there are lots of developers who are creating horror games in VR, and we don't know the psychological effect of that on the human mind.
Sorry, what they're creating?
Oh, so if, for example, they're creating horror games.
Horror games, okay, understood.
Virtual reality, things like that. We don't know the consequences of that on the human mind, because it's very different to watching a 2D movie. You can switch something off and fall asleep and forget about it. 3D, you're in it, so yeah.
So both of you guys, Lorraine and Nondo, what is your biggest challenges right now as a UX designer?
I guess, yeah, I guess I can go. I guess some of the biggest challenges for me is definitely the timelines. I think what's not really known in our industry is that for some of these projects, I know that a lot of students, they think that when I was a student, I thought that all these projects, could be infinite, whenever. But I think for me, it's definitely the strict timelines, because companies are trying to catch up in their digital presence. So there's a certain like timeline they have to meet in order to catch up to some of these big players. Like, for example, like if you're working in like finance, I know some of the banks in Japan as well as in Canada, they're pretty outdated. But if you get like some of these like modern like fintech, these fintech companies, they are definitely, like Shopify, for example, they're definitely the ones that are like big players. So it's definitely like the trying to catch up, helping these companies catch up to speed. So I am kind of feeling that pressure into working in such a really small, short deadline. And then also in Canada, they have like this accessibility law that they have to meet by the end of this year, that all these big companies, especially in finance, their websites have to be accessible by the end of this year. So I am feeling the pressure with these companies to deliver some of these, like their digital products, to meet the accessibility standards.
What is the accessibility standards?
Oh, because some of the so the accessibility standards is, well, in Canada, and then I know I think Japan has that, because Japan's pretty big on accessibility. It's just to make sure that, like an example of a website, it's just to make sure that some of the websites they are doing, for example, someone is blind, the website can do like text to speech, for example, or if they're deaf, then make sure like some of the videos have correct captions. Or if it's even some websites, they don't really render for mobile. So sometimes it's like it could also affect like your eyesight, for example, because if some of these websites are not rendering for mobile, then that's not following accessibility. So they have to make sure that some of the mobile on your phone, some of these websites can be meet to some of the sizing standards of these for people that have like eyesight problems. Like, yeah, that's what like in general terms of accessibility. Yeah.
Got it. So deadline, like meeting the timeline or the schedule, is one of the biggest challenge for Lorraine. What about you, Nondo? Like, I think you're in Japan, and language is a big barrier. So
Yeah. I was gonna ask, like, Lorraine, what part of Canada are you in? Maybe that might also be an issue. Like, if you're in French-speaking Canada, I suppose.
Oh no, you know what? I don't speak French. Honestly, my Japanese is way better than my French.
Okay, so I won't ask you like randomly to share some French words for us. Okay, so.
Oh god, no one has ever asked me that. But I do know, I do know Japanese was a huge struggle for me when I was living in Japan.
It's still the same. It hasn't changed. I have to make it clear. I am a student of Japanese. I'm studying Japanese now, and I'll continue to study Japanese for a very long time. I don't think I'll ever stop learning. And the reason I think why the language is a challenge in Japan, and I think Canada, as I actually even mentioned French, was like, if I go to France, right, I'm expected to speak French and communicate with French people. However, French is a romantic language, so its basis is very similar to English. But the next bigger thing is culturally. So when you think of a language, at least when I think of a language, is that you can't separate the language from its culture. And Japanese, like any other language, has that connection. And here where you see it is in the way you communicate and deliver ideas. So speaking to a Japanese or anyone who's grown up in Japan in English about the exact same topic will be different. And so when you're learning Japanese, or what I'm learning right now, is that half of the things are not even spoken. AB, I'm sure you've also seen this, is that the gestures, you don't see that in books. It's just lived experiences. I also think the level of hierarchy, again, is part of the language. You speak sonkeigo, keigo. These are all structural byproducts of the culture, which effectively, for everyone who might not know this, is that keigo and sonkeigo are polite ways of speaking, not to levels of French, English, or any other romantic language. My home language, from Zambia, specifically Mambwe, and we have it. Mambwe is a Zambian language. So you might see it in other cultures, but it's not to the level of where it comes in the workspace. So if you're speaking to your boss, you have this barrier, and then that barrier is the way you use specific language words and vocabs. So when you're studying Japanese, you're kind of going to have to learn like 3 different versions of the exact same sentence. So I think that is a big challenge. I do feel it's changing because of just economics. It's very difficult for any country right now to attract talent purely based on language requirements or retain talent. So, and I think, yeah, it does depend on the type of work you're doing, but it's still very much there. Would I tell someone that they need like a really high level of Japanese to come into here and be a success? I would say no, because there are lots of people who've done that. I would say that you would have to be very good at communicating in whatever tool you are able to, because you will find a barrier with Japanese. So I use drawing, by the way. That's how I communicate with people here, and it gets me around.
Interesting. Yeah, drawing is something I never heard people use in communicating. Maybe it's somewhere there in the UX world, but yeah, I mean, I think even for a native person, language would be a barrier, because a student, for instance, the way he grew up in a college and the workspace, as you mentioned, Keigo, Son Keigo, he might not even used it before, right? And now he has to, include that. So I totally get what you mean. My next question would be like, so where you guys see yourself in next 5 years in the UX world?
Honestly, to be honest, like I don't really plan that far ahead in my career, but I do feel that like, yeah, like UX is like my home in here. So I'm still like learning and enjoying the journey. I would like to try, I think I would like to try a different industry, maybe like maybe in a startup or in-house, just to see how like the process works. So I think like in terms of that, like I would like to see how like other fields in UX is like, but in terms of like my my growth, I'm still trying to learn and see where I'm at. Yeah, I'm sorry if that wasn't like
No
the right answer.
No problem.
No, I'm gonna jump it. I'm gonna say like I'm 100% feeling that vibe, because I am also still learning so much about UX, to the point that it's so different. Like when I was in construction and design, I could like plan that out 10 years ahead. I'm gonna do this by the time I'm this by this. And the great thing is that in construction we have laws. So the laws kind of dictate. You can be like, okay, after 3 years, I get this license. After 2 years, I get this license. It's like ticks. I would probably say the one thing, going back, is that one thing I do see myself definitely doing more is developing larger experiences. What I mean by that is that I've had the taste of creating experiences where the 2D part of it is just one section of the story, the journey. What I mean by that is, like, if you think about mobility, right? Urban mobility in the future, how are we going to move from a vehicle into your house, into your office place? Your first interaction might be your cell phone. You wake up in the morning, you check that out. Next, your car should arrive at the perfect time. So you don't own a car, now you rent it, but you jump in and your Spotify is going to automatically like pick it up. Right now it does do it, but it's not individualized, right? Well, it's not individualized. It's not shared.
Synchronized as much.
Yeah. Yes. And so then the next thing is that it'll automatically pick up that, oh, okay, you're going to the office and it does this. And then automatically. So all this, what's really exciting is that there's a growth in the area of bigger experiences. What I really learned coming from construction as a urban designer was that I never sold anyone a building. And I was really privileged to have really worked with some great people where they sold me. Nondo, we're not selling buildings, we're selling a lifestyle. And the second thing is that if we're not setting a lifestyle, the second option is that we're not going to make buildings. Instead of making buildings, our job is to create communities, all those, both of those two examples, a lifestyle or creating communities, is you have to be just so well-rounded and in tuned into what the greater ecosystem is in order to create a 2D. Because remember, 2D is like the most mundane thing of our lives, right? Like everything is 3D, right? Your house, your chair, when a baby is born, it looks at its mom's round face and it feels warmth. When you see 2D, you like remove all this life away, right?
Static.
And these type of like really important relationships are really getting exciting right now for at least UX, and I'm going to say it, user experience designer, because I think that's what we should be. Instead of saying UX, because I think UX is now really touched into like the really digital services, and it's like, yeah, you're UX designer, can you do a website or an app for me? And I really like when someone comes to me and they're like, hey Nondo, I want to create this really great product and I don't know how to do it. And I'm like, make sure everything else is right in your business, in the way you connect with your customers, in the way you connect with the people who use your service, and then we'll introduce the digital part, And I think as a user experience designer, you just have to be that, you just have to go through it and learn the business, build the story. And then once the app is finished, you go to them afterwards so that when they wake up that morning and they're opening up their phone and they're like, I don't even remember that I'm using a 2D app. I just remembered I woke up in the morning, switched on my phone, got into my car, got to my meeting, had a great day. So our job, I think, going forward, and what I really want to kind of get into, because fortunately now the technology is getting there, is to be a designer who is just in the background. No one sees me. No one knows I exist. No one even knows that, oh yeah, like a UX designer made this experience, or a UI team kind of came together and put together something that was visually accessible. It should just be synonymous and, as you will put it, in sync with your life. So yeah, that's what I'm excited about. And that's what I'm going to try and do in the next 5 years. So
awesome.
I've got a lot to get there.
Yeah, I do want to mention, okay, so now that like Nondo was talking about this, I do know that like in the future, I am trying to learn about game development, because I do see it's growing in terms of like UX professionals, and the gaming industry is such a huge $1 billion, and I'm a huge gamer myself too.
I am okay.
And so this is like a space that I would love to explore, like Minecraft, and be of an expert to help these people. So I know that like Microsoft is thinking about some of the accessibility with Xbox. So because some people, for example, they may not have hands to use game controllers, for example. So this is like one aspect that I wanted to do. So I've been like help like doing side projects on like game development just to understand like the process. And yeah, because I'm a huge gamer myself, I'm always playing my Nintendo Switch. So
Lorraine, I need to get that. I'm also a big gamer. We need to like we need to jump into a Twitch after this, either like run around of like Call of Duty, or like if you're on Switch, do a bit of Smash Bros, just to finish off the day, like, get your, but
we need to do Switch now. We need to do like a Twitch channel, and
yes,
the UX at games.
Yes, angry UX designers at the end of the day, like just beating each other up online.
Guys, I'm very curious, Nondo. You mentioned a lot about architecturing and designing like what do you call smart cities. I also have some clients who are working on smart cities, and it's kind of a very big thing right now. So are you still engaged in architecturing, building smart cities, or you're only now focusing on the UX or with the...
I am, so that's a great question. I am a architect plus UX designer. I never left my past. And I tell a lot of people who are getting into UX industry, use your existing background that you're transitioning into UX as your clutch, as something that makes you unique and special. So I do work in smart cities quite a lot. I will say it's another place I want to be in, because that big picture experience really works well with smart cities and smart places. I will say something. The Japanese context for at least smart places and smart cities, I think is very different in the way it's treated in the US. These are two places I've had at least a bit of contact with, and also Dubai. Those are like the Middle East. And I think the maturity of getting the experiences out there. But it's exciting space, man. It's
awesome.
They don't have any architects in there. So when I walk in there and they're like talking about all this tech stuff I don't know, and then they're like, oh, we're gonna have to put this in the building. And then I'm like, oh, guys, don't worry. I'm the guy who'll do the engineering drawings for you. Don't worry about it.
Great.
And yeah.
So we're actually almost in the end part of our conversation today. So I will have last 3 questions, and that would be a lightning round. So basically you need to answer in one word. Okay, both of you guys. Are you guys ready? Cool. So who is your number 1 design hero at this moment? Starting with Lorraine. Any names in mind?
Team Lab, definitely.
Team Lab. Okay. How about Nondo?
Tadeo Ando is an architect.
Sorry again, the name, please.
Tadeo Ando.
Japanese. Yeah. All right. One favorite app in whether it could be a great UI or could be UX or anything. Starting with Nondo.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm going to say it's not really released yet, but I really love some project Woven is doing here. Woven Toyota. It's Woven Planet. Let me say the name properly. Yeah. You have to but it's around smart cities, so that's my favorite.
Okay. How about you, Lorraine? Anything favorite?
Yeah, mine is Wise, which is, it used to be known as TransferWise. It's a money currency exchange where you can deposit for money. But yeah, just like how it was.
Awesome.
It tells you the journey of where your money is. So yeah, it's great. Use it. I use it a lot in Japan.
Sure. One analytic tool or a key performance indicator for evaluating your design.
Ooh. Okay, Lorraine, do you want to go there, or should I?
I know we use Adobe Analytics just to measure the websites and the SEO, but I don't have a favorite. I just use it because work uses it.
Okay. Yeah, and for my favorite analytic tool, it's going to be IBM SPPS. It's data analysis, but it really works well during like quantitative interviews. Yeah.
One book or material you'd like to recommend to future UI UX designers? It could be even a podcast.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I have a book, Service Design Now. Service Design Now is my Bible. I have it lying around somewhere, but that's my Bible. Podcast would be Design Matters by Debbie Millman. Really crazy type of characters on that. So yeah, those are my 2.
Anything for you, Lorraine? Want to recommend?
I like Microcopy, which talks about UX writing, because I think people forget about that. The copy and the writing that we see on websites and apps, they are also very important in the user experience. So it really helps me to, I guess, draft better writing from a user standpoint. And then podcasts, I like Design Life by Charlie and Femke. They just give more of a day-to-day life of like struggles and challenges and like growth for UX designers that are working.
Great, guys. So we're almost here. Just one last suggestions for our future UX designers you guys would like to recommend.
I would recommend they take a look at this amazing podcast called Demo Design. No, I'm joking. Let me know. Hey,
No, it is. It's good. I would really vouch for it. It's amazing. It's you get to learn about different designers in different countries and like solving for problems that are not even of their own culture. So yeah, definitely would recommend that.
Oh my goodness, Lorraine, I need to hire you. I was looking for someone in marketing, but I think that we found the perfect person. Like you'll be on my
Guys,
phone.
check out Demo Design. I'll put out the link in the below in the wherever the podcast will go. So yeah, we'll be following that.
Thank you. But on the real, I would say, as I mentioned earlier, use your base interests. So whatever you've studied before, whether you've come from education, maybe you're a teacher before, you're a doctor before, don't forget that. Use that as your powerful pivot in order to get you into an amazing UX career, because that's what we need. We just don't need UX designers all doing everything. We need UX designers everywhere. And so specialist knowledge is going to give you a really big step up in this industry. So that's my advice. Never forget your origins.
Awesome. Great. Lorraine, anything you want to add?
I would say don't do the cookie cutter design process, meaning like the standard flow that you see, because many junior designers do this. Just to know that these tools, they're just recipes and tools to help you in the problem solving process. So try to be like a detective or even like a doctor and like think of like what is the actual problem is, and then use those tools like personas and like competitive analysis and like user flows, like use these tools as like your aid to solve the problem. So yeah, that's just my advice. And then for the podcast, yeah, go and check out. Yeah, you can check out my podcast too, but we already know about that.
Designer Sushi, right?
Yeah. Designer
Awesome.
Sushi. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great, guys. Thank you so much for your time. I think it was very enlightening. It was very deep as well. We touched on a lot of great stuff. So I hope people will enjoy. And if they want to connect with you guys, I'll just put your LinkedIn below so that, people can also find you guys. Cool. So with that said, I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
No, thank you, AB.